My name is Eve, and I never thought I'd be plotting revenge against my own husband. But here I am, trapped in a loveless marriage with a man who sees me as nothing more than a convenient punching bag for his frustrations. You're nothing but a barren, useless excuse of a wife. I'm doing you a favor by letting you gain some parenting experience. Be grateful, Eve. Caleb spat, his voice dripping with contempt. I flinched as he slammed the front door, leaving me alone to face the chaos of Emma's kids wreaking havoc in our once peaceful home. The sound of shattering glass echoed from the living room, followed by high-pitched squeals and laughter. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and wondered how I'd ended up here. Just 5 years ago, Caleb had swept me off my feet with grand gestures and promises of eternal love. Now, at 34, I found myself questioning every decision that led to this moment. Aunt Eve. Ben's trying to flush my dolly down the toilet. Lucy's shrill voice pierced through my thoughts. I rushed upstairs, my heart pounding. Ben, stop that right now, I shouted, yanking the bathroom door open. The 7-year-old boy looked up at me, his eyes wide with feigned innocence. I was just giving her dolly a bath, he said, a mischievous grin spreading across his face. I snatched the doll from his hands and handed it back to a sniffling Lucy. Go play in the backyard, both of you. And no more flushing things down the toilet. As I herded the children outside, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Caleb. Emma needs us to watch the kids overnight. Don't screw this up. My stomach churned. One day had already pushed me to my limits, and now I was expected to handle 3 unruly children for an entire night? I typed back a quick response. Caleb, I can't do this alone. Can't we ask your parents for help? His reply was almost instantaneous. Don't be pathetic, Eve. If you can't handle kids for one night, how do you expect to ever be a mother? The words stung, reopening the wound of our infertility struggles. I blinked back tears, refusing to let them fall. This wasn't the life I had envisioned for myself. A crash from the backyard jolted me back to reality. I raced outside to find Riley, the youngest at 5 years old, covered in mud and giggling uncontrollably. Look, Aunt Eve. I'm a mud monster, he exclaimed, running towards me with outstretched arms. I dodged his muddy embrace, my patience wearing thin. Riley, that's enough. All of you, inside now. It's time to clean up and have dinner. As I corralled the children back into the house, my mind wandered to the day we'd bumped into Emma at the grocery store. Caleb's eyes had lit up in a way I hadn't seen in years, and my heart had sunk. I should have known then that trouble was brewing. Can we have pizza for dinner? Ben asked, snapping me out of my thoughts. I sighed, too exhausted to argue. Fine, pizza it is. While the kids squabbled over toppings, I placed the order and retreated to the kitchen. Leaning against the counter, I pulled out my phone and stared at my contact list. My finger hovered over my sister Hannah's name. We hadn't spoken in years, not since our falling out over Caleb. She had warned me about him, said he would break my heart. I had been too blinded by love to listen. Now, as I stood in my chaotic kitchen, surrounded by the mess of a life I never wanted, I realized how right she had been. But could I swallow my pride and reach out to her now? As another crash echoed through the house, followed by more screaming, I knew I had no choice. I needed help, and Hannah was my only hope. With trembling fingers, I pressed the call button, praying she would answer. As the phone rang, I steeled myself for what was to come. One way or another, things were about to change. I never expected a simple trip to the grocery store would be the catalyst for my world unraveling. But there she was, standing in the produce aisle, her perfectly manicured hand hovering over a pile of avocados. Emma? Caleb's voice rang out, a note of excitement I hadn't heard in years coloring his tone. The woman turned, her face lighting up with recognition. Caleb. Oh my God, it's been forever. I stood frozen, watching as my husband embraced his ex-girlfriend with far too much enthusiasm. When they finally broke apart, Emma's gaze fell on me, her smile never wavering. And you must be Eve, she said, extending her hand. I've heard so much about you. I forced a smile, shaking her hand. Funny, I can't say the same. Caleb shot me a warning glance before turning back to Emma. How have you been? Last I heard, you were moving to California. Emma laughed, a tinkling sound that set my teeth on edge. Oh, that didn't work out. I'm back in town now, with my 3 little ones in tow. You have kids? Caleb asked, his eyes widening with interest. 3 of them, Emma replied, her smile turning wistful. It's been challenging being a single mom. I watched as Caleb's expression softened, and a knot formed in my stomach. I knew that look. It was the same one he used to give me when we first started dating. We should catch up properly, Caleb said, his voice eager. Why don't you come over for dinner sometime? I opened my mouth to protest, but Emma beat me to it. That sounds lovely. How about this Friday? Before I could interject, Caleb was nodding enthusiastically. Perfect. We'll see you then. As Emma walked away with a wave, I turned to Caleb, my voice low and angry. What the hell was that? He shrugged, already pushing the cart towards the checkout.
What?
It's just dinner with an old friend. An old girlfriend, I corrected. And you didn't even ask me if I was okay with it. Caleb's jaw tightened. I didn't realize I needed your permission to invite friends over, Eve. The ride home was tense, filled with loaded silence. As we unpacked the groceries, I tried one last time to reason with him. Caleb, I'm not comfortable with this. Can't we just cancel? He slammed a can of tomatoes onto the counter, making me jump. For God's sake, Eve, stop being so insecure. It's pathetic. I flinched at his words, feeling the familiar sting of tears. But I blinked them back, refusing to let him see how much he'd hurt me. Friday arrived all too quickly. I spent the day cleaning the house, my stomach in knots. When the doorbell rang at 7 p.m. sharp, I plastered on my best fake smile and opened the door. Emma stood there, looking effortlessly glamorous in a flowing sundress. Behind her were 3 children, all bearing a striking resemblance to their mother.
Eve, darling.
Emma exclaimed, air-kissing my cheeks. Thank you so much for having us. These are my little angels, Lucy, Ben, and Riley. The kids mumbled hellos, eyeing me warily. As they filed past me into the house, I caught a whiff of Emma's expensive perfume and felt suddenly self-conscious in my simple jeans and blouse. Caleb appeared then, his face lighting up at the sight of Emma. You made it.
Come in.
Kids, make yourselves at home. And just like that, my carefully ordered world descended into chaos. The children scattered, their excited shrieks echoing through the house. Emma glided into the living room, Caleb hovering attentively at her side. I retreated to the kitchen, busying myself with dinner preparations. Through the doorway, I could hear Emma's melodious laughter mingling with Caleb's deep chuckles. The sound made my chest ache. As I stirred the pasta sauce, I caught snippets of their conversation. Always knew you'd be successful, Caleb. You were always so ambitious. Can't believe how amazing you look, Em. The years have been kind. I gripped the wooden spoon tighter, willing myself to stay calm. But as I glanced into the living room and saw Caleb's hand resting casually on Emma's knee, I knew with sickening certainty that this was only the beginning of my nightmare. The weeks following that fateful dinner became a blur of chaos and mounting frustration. Emma's visits, once an anomaly, transformed into an almost daily occurrence. My home, once a sanctuary, now felt like a war zone. Caleb, we need to talk about this, I said one evening after Emma and her brood had finally left. The living room looked like a tornado had hit it, toys strewn everywhere and mysterious stains on the carpet. He barely glanced up from his phone.
About what?
About Emma and her kids practically living here. It's disrupting everything. Caleb's eyes narrowed. They're going through a tough time, Eve. I thought you'd be more understanding. Understanding. I sputtered. I'm the one cleaning up their messes, cooking for them, trying to work from home with all this noise dash. Maybe if you had kids of your own, you'd be more patient, he snapped, his words cutting deep. I recoiled as if slapped. That's not fair, and you know it. But Caleb had already turned away, ending the conversation. I was left standing alone, surrounded by the debris of a life I no longer recognized. The next day, I was on a conference call when the doorbell rang. I ignored it, knowing Caleb would answer. Minutes later, shrieks of laughter pierced through my concentration. "Sorry, can you repeat that?" I asked my client, trying to mask my irritation. "I'm having some background noise issues." As soon as the call ended, I stormed downstairs. Emma's kids were running wild, with Emma herself lounging on the couch, scrolling through her phone. "Oh, Eve," she chirped, looking up. "I hope we're not bothering you." The kids were just so eager to come over. I forced a smile. "Actually, Emma, I'm working. It's a bit disruptive dash." "Eve." Caleb's sharp voice cut me off. He'd appeared in the doorway, frowning. A word. In the kitchen, he laid into me. "What's wrong with you? They're just kids having fun." "I'm trying to work, Caleb. This is my home office too."
He scoffed.
"Maybe if you made more of an effort to connect with them, you'd enjoy their company." I stared at him, disbelieving. When did I become the villain in my own home? But Caleb had already turned away, heading back to Emma and the kids. I watched as he sat next to her on the couch, their heads bent close in conversation, while the children continued their rampage. Days blurred into weeks. My work suffered as I struggled to maintain any semblance of order. Caleb grew more distant, spending every free moment with Emma and her kids. I became a ghost in my own home, retreating to our bedroom to escape the constant chaos. One evening, I overheard Caleb and Emma talking in hushed tones in the kitchen. "I don't know how much longer I can do this, Caleb was saying. "Eve's becoming impossible to live with." Emma's voice was soothing. "Oh, honey, you deserve so much better. Someone who understands you, supports you." I backed away, my heart pounding. The pieces were falling into place, the lingering touches, the private jokes, the way Caleb's eyes lit up whenever Emma entered the room. That night, as Caleb slept beside me, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The life I'd built was crumbling around me, and I felt powerless to stop it. I thought of my sister Hannah, of the rift between us that had seemed so insurmountable. Now, faced with the wreckage of my marriage, that old hurt seemed trivial. With trembling fingers, I reached for my phone. It was time to swallow my pride. As I typed out a message to Hannah, tears slid silently down my cheeks. I was done being a doormat. It was time to fight back. I woke to the sound of hushed voices and shuffling feet. Blinking away sleep, I found Caleb hastily packing a suitcase. "What's going on?" I asked, my voice thick with confusion. Caleb barely glanced at me. "Emma's going on a trip. I'm going with her to help with the kids." I sat up, suddenly wide awake.
"What?
"For how long?" "3 days," he replied, zipping up the bag. "Emma's dropping the kids off here in an hour. You'll need to watch them while we're gone." The room spun. "Caleb, you can't be serious. I have work, and I can't handle 3 kids alone for 3 days." He fixed me with a cold stare. "This isn't up for discussion, Eve. Emma needs help, and I'm going to be there for her. It's about time you stepped up and did something useful around here." Before I could respond, the doorbell rang. Caleb rushed downstairs, leaving me shell-shocked in our bedroom. I stumbled down after him, just in time to see Emma ushering her children inside. She beamed at me, all saccharine sweetness.
"Eve, darling."
"Thank you so much for doing this. You're a lifesaver." I opened my mouth to protest, but Caleb cut me off. "Of course she's happy to help. Right, Eve?" Trapped under their expectant gazes, I could only nod mutely. Emma clapped her hands together. "Wonderful. Kids, be good for Aunt Eve. Mommy and Uncle Caleb will be back in a few days." As Emma rattled off a list of instructions, dietary restrictions, bedtime routines, favorite toys, I felt my world tilting on its axis. This couldn't be happening. Before I knew it, Caleb and Emma were out the door, leaving me alone with 3 wide-eyed children and a sinking feeling in my stomach. The first day was a nightmare. Lucy refused to eat anything but ice cream. Ben dismantled my laptop to see how it works, and Riley had a meltdown because his favorite TV show wasn't on. By nightfall, I was at my wits' end. The house was a disaster zone, I'd missed 2 important work calls, and the kids were still running wild. As I slumped on the couch, my phone buzzed. It was Caleb. "How's everything going?" he asked, the sound of laughter and music in the background. "It's chaos," I admitted. "Caleb, I can't do this. Can you please come home?" His voice hardened. "Don't be dramatic, Eve. They're just kids. Figure it out." The line went dead. I stared at the phone, tears welling up. That's when I noticed a new text message from Hannah. "Hey sis, just checking in. How are you holding up?" My fingers hovered over the keyboard. Pride warred with desperation. Finally, I typed out a response. "Hannah, I need help. Can you come over?" Her reply was almost instantaneous. "On my way." An hour later, Hannah swept through the front door like a force of nature. She took one look at the chaos around us and sprang into action. "All right, troops," she called out to the kids. "Who wants to play a game?" To my amazement, the children gathered around her, hanging on her every word. Within minutes, she had them engaged in a cleanup competition, turning the mess into a game. As we worked side by side, Hannah turned to me. "Eve, what's really going on here?" The dam broke. Through tears, I told her everything: Caleb's emotional abuse, Emma's manipulation, my growing suspicions of their affair. Hannah listened, her face darkening with each revelation. When I finished, she pulled me into a fierce hug. "I'm so sorry, Eve. I should have been here for you. But I'm here now, and we're going to fix this." For the first time in months, I felt a glimmer of hope. As we tackled the chaos together, a plan began to form in my mind. Caleb and Emma thought they could walk all over me, but they had no idea what was coming. With Hannah by my side, I was ready to fight back. The tables were about to turn, and I couldn't wait to see their faces when they returned to find their little game was over. The next morning, I woke to the smell of pancakes and the sound of laughter. For a moment, I thought I was dreaming. Then I remembered Hannah was here. I padded downstairs to find my sister at the stove, flipping pancakes with expert ease. Emma's children sat at the table, quietly coloring as they waited for breakfast. "Morning, sleepyhead," Hannah grinned. "Hope you're hungry." As we ate, Hannah outlined her plan. "First, we establish a routine. Kids thrive on structure. Then, we'll tackle this house. By the time Caleb and Emma return, they won't recognize the place or the kids." Over the next 2 days, Hannah worked miracles. She implemented a chore chart, turning cleaning into a game. She set up a reward system for good behavior and consequences for breaking rules. The children, starved for attention and discipline, responded enthusiastically. While Hannah managed the kids, I threw myself into work, catching up on missed deadlines. For the first time in months, I felt productive, energized. On the third day, as Hannah and I sat on the porch watching the kids play in the yard, she turned to me with a serious expression. "Eve, we need to talk about what happens when Caleb comes back." I sighed, the bubble of peace bursting. "I know. I don't know what to do." Hannah squeezed my hand. "You can't keep living like this. It's time to fight back." She was right, of course. But the thought of confronting Caleb terrified me. What if he left me? What if? My thoughts were interrupted by a shout from inside. We rushed in to find Ben standing by Caleb's open laptop, looking confused. "Aunt Eve, why does Uncle Caleb have pictures of Mommy in his computer?" My blood ran cold. Hannah gently moved Ben aside as I approached the laptop. There, in full view, was a folder labeled M. With shaking hands, I clicked it open. Dozens of intimate photos of Emma filled the screen. Emails detailing secret rendezvous. Bank statements showing large transfers to an unknown account. "Oh, Eve," Hannah breathed. "I'm so sorry." I felt numb. Part of me had known, of course. But seeing the evidence laid bare, it was devastating. As Hannah ushered the kids out of the room, I sank into Caleb's chair, my mind racing. This was it, the proof I needed. But what would I do with it? Hannah returned, her face set with determination. "We need to make copies of everything. Then we call a lawyer." I nodded, still in shock. As Hannah worked on backing up the files, I noticed an email draft Caleb had left open. My eyes widened as I read it. Hannah, I called, my voice shaking. Look at this. The email detailed plans for Caleb and Emma to move to another state, taking the kids with them. They were planning to leave in just 2 weeks. That son of a datch, Hannah cut herself off, glancing at the kids in the next room. Eve, we need to act fast. She was right. The numbness was fading, replaced by a burning anger. Caleb thought he could discard me like yesterday's trash? He had another thing coming. Okay, I said, standing up straighter. What's our next move? Hannah's eyes gleamed with a mix of pride and determination. First, we secure all this evidence. Then, we prepare for their return. They think they're coming back to a meek, overwhelmed Eve. Let's show them how wrong they are. As we worked late into the night, planning our strategy, I felt a strange mix of emotions, fear, anger, but also a growing sense of empowerment. For too long, I'd been a victim in my own life. It was time to take control. When Caleb and Emma returned tomorrow, they'd find a very different Eve waiting for them. And I couldn't wait to see the looks on their faces. The sound of a car pulling into the driveway sent a jolt through my body. Hannah squeezed my hand reassuringly as we heard the front door open. Eve, we're back. Caleb's voice rang out, a note of surprise evident as he took in the spotless living room. I stepped out of the kitchen, Hannah close behind me. Caleb and Emma stood in the entryway, their smiles faltering as they registered our united front. Welcome back, I said, my voice steady. How was your trip? Caleb's eyes darted between Hannah and me. What's going on here? Why is Hannah here? Before I could respond, Emma's children came bounding down the stairs, their faces alight with excitement.
Mom.
Uncle Caleb, look what we made. Lucy held up a colorful chart. It's our chore wheel. Aunt Eve and Aunt Hannah helped us make it. Emma's smile looked strained as she examined the chart. That's nice, sweetie. Why don't you all go play upstairs while the grown-ups talk? But Mom, Ben protested, we have to finish our homework first. That's the rule now. Emma's eyebrows shot up. Rule? What rule? The rules Aunt Eve and Aunt Hannah made. Riley chimed in. They're much better than your rules, Mom. We actually have fun now. I watched as Emma's face tightened, her eyes flashing with anger. Caleb stepped forward, his charm offensive in full swing. Kids, listen to your mother. Go upstairs now. To everyone's surprise, it was Ben who spoke up. No, Uncle Caleb. We don't have to do what you say anymore. Aunt Eve showed us the pictures on your computer. You're not a good person. The color drained from Caleb's face. Emma whirled on him, her voice shrill. What pictures? I stepped forward, my heart pounding but my resolve firm. I think it's time we all had a talk. Kids, please go upstairs. Hannah will be up in a minute to help with homework. As Hannah ushered the children upstairs, I led Caleb and Emma into the living room. The tension was palpable as we sat down. Eve, whatever you think you know, Caleb began, but I cut him off. Save it, Caleb. I've seen everything. The photos, the emails, the bank statements. I know about your plans to leave with Emma and the kids. Emma's head snapped towards Caleb. You told her? He didn't have to, I replied coldly. You two weren't as careful as you thought. Caleb's face twisted with anger. You had no right to go through my personal files, and you had no right to betray our marriage. I shot back, my voice rising. Did you think I wouldn't find out? That I'd just roll over and let you walk all over me? Emma stood up, her eyes wild. This is ridiculous. Come on, Caleb. Let's get the kids and go. You're not taking those children anywhere. Hannah's voice rang out as she re-entered the room. Not until we've sorted this mess out. Caleb jumped to his feet. You can't stop us. They're Emma's kids. Actually, I said, pulling out a folder. I can. I've spoken to a lawyer. Given the evidence of your affair and your plans to flee the state with the children, we have grounds for an emergency custody order. Emma's face crumpled. You can't do this. They're my children. Children you were perfectly happy to dump on me whenever it was convenient, I retorted. Children who have flourished under proper care and attention in just 3 days. Caleb lunged forward, his face contorted with rage. "You manipulative bitch. You planned this all along." Hannah stepped between us, her voice steel. "Back off, Caleb. Unless you want assault charges added to your growing list of problems." As Caleb and Emma's world unraveled before my eyes, I felt a strange mix of satisfaction and sadness. This wasn't how I'd imagined my marriage ending, but I knew it was necessary. "So, what happens now?" Emma asked, her voice small. I took a deep breath. "Now, we're going to have a long, honest conversation about the future. And this time, I'm the one calling the shots." The tense silence that had settled over the room was shattered by the sound of a car pulling into the driveway. Caleb's face paled as he recognized the distinctive rumble of his father's vintage Cadillac. "What the hell?" he muttered, moving towards the window. Hannah shot me a knowing look. I nodded, steeling myself for what was to come. The doorbell rang, its cheerful chime a stark contrast to the atmosphere in the house. I moved to answer it, Caleb hot on my heels. "Mom? Dad? What are you doing here?" Caleb's voice cracked as he faced his parents on the doorstep. Margot and Richard Lawson stood there, concern etched on their faces. "Hannah called us," Margot explained, her eyes darting between Caleb and me. "She said there was an emergency." Caleb whirled on Hannah, his face contorted with rage. "You had no right, Dash." "She had every right," Richard cut in, his voice stern. "Now, someone better start explaining what's going on here." As we all filed back into the living room, Emma tried to make a discreet exit. "I should probably go check on the kids, Dash." "Sit down, Emma," I said firmly. "You're as much a part of this as anyone." Over the next hour, the whole sordid tale unfolded. I presented the evidence of Caleb and Emma's affair, the financial records showing Caleb's mismanagement of our joint accounts, and their plans to flee with Emma's children. Margot gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "Caleb, how could you?" Caleb's face was a mask of defiance. "You don't understand. Eve and I were having problems. Emma was there for me, Dash." "Don't you dare try to justify this," Richard thundered. "We raised you better than this." As the reality of the situation sank in, Emma's composure began to crack. "This isn't fair," she wailed. "We love each other. You can't keep us apart." In a desperate move, she grabbed Caleb's hand and made a dash for the stairs. "Let's just get the kids and go. We don't have to explain ourselves to anyone." But Caleb's parents were quicker. Richard blocked the staircase while Margot positioned herself by the front door. "You're not going anywhere," Richard said, his voice low and dangerous. "Not until we've sorted out this mess you've created." Caleb's shoulders slumped in defeat. "Fine. What do you want from me?" Richard's eyes were cold as he addressed his son. "First, you're going to sign over control of all your accounts to your mother and me. We'll make sure Eve gets what she's owed in the divorce." "Divorce?" Caleb sputtered. "Who said anything about divorce?" I stepped forward, my voice steady. "I did." "It's over, Caleb. I won't be your doormat anymore." Margot nodded approvingly. "Good for you, Eve. And as for you," she turned to Emma, "I suggest you start thinking about what's best for your children. Because from what I've seen, it certainly isn't you." Emma crumpled to the floor, sobbing. Caleb stood frozen, the reality of his actions finally sinking in. Richard turned to me, his expression softening. "Eve, I want you to know that Margot and I support you completely. We'll make sure you're taken care of during and after the divorce proceedings." I felt tears prick my eyes. "Thank you. That means more than you know." As Hannah wrapped an arm around my shoulders, I realized that this was it. The moment everything changed. The life I had known was over, but a new one was just beginning. Caleb made one last, desperate attempt. "Mom, Dad, please. You can't just cut me off. I'm your son." Richard's voice was heavy with disappointment. "A son we no longer recognize. Until you make this right, until you show true remorse for your actions, consider yourself disowned." The finality of those words hung in the air. As Caleb and Emma's world crumbled around them, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The road ahead would be challenging, but for the first time in years, I felt hope. I caught Hannah's eye and saw my own determination reflected there. Whatever came next, I knew I wouldn't face it alone. 6 months after that fateful confrontation, I stood in my new apartment, surrounded by moving boxes and the promise of a fresh start. The divorce had been finalized last week, thanks in large part to the unwavering support of Caleb's parents and my sister Hannah. I ran my hand along the smooth surface of my desk, a parting gift from Margot and Richard. To new beginnings, the card had read. Their kindness still overwhelmed me at times. A knock at the door pulled me from my reverie. Hannah's smiling face greeted me as I opened it. "Ready for your first day at the new job, sis?" she asked, stepping inside. I nodded, a mix of excitement and nervousness fluttering in my stomach. As ready as I'll ever be. As we drove across the city, Hannah filled me in on the latest developments. Emma's kids are doing great with their new therapist. The court-mandated visitations are going smoothly, and Emma seems to be making an effort to be a better mother. I felt a pang of sympathy for the children I'd grown to care for during those chaotic days. And Caleb? Hannah's expression hardened. Last I heard, he's still trying to win back his parents' approval. The affair with Emma fell apart pretty quickly once the money dried up. I nodded, surprised at how little I felt at the mention of my ex-husband's name. The anger and hurt that had consumed me for so long had faded, replaced by a sense of peace and purpose. As we pulled up to my new workplace, a bustling nonprofit focused on supporting victims of domestic abuse, Hannah squeezed my hand. "You've got this, Eve. I'm so proud of you." Tears pricked my eyes. "I couldn't have done any of this without you, Hannah. Thank you for being there when I needed you most." She pulled me into a fierce hug. "That's what sisters are for. Now go show them what you're made of." As I walked into the building, head held high, I reflected on the journey that had brought me here. The pain, the betrayal, the moments of despair. They had all led to this new chapter in my life. My first day flew by in a whirlwind of introductions, orientations, and the exhilarating feeling of being part of something meaningful. As I packed up to leave, my new boss, Sarah, stopped by my desk. "Eve, I just wanted to say how impressed I am with your passion and insight. Your personal experience will be invaluable in helping other women find their strength." I smiled, feeling a warmth spread through my chest.
Thank you, Sarah.
This work, it means everything to me. That evening, as I sat on my small balcony watching the sunset, I pulled out my journal. It had been my constant companion throughout the divorce, a place to pour out my fears and hopes. I began to write, "Dear future Eve, today marks the beginning of a new journey. I want you to remember how far you've come. The woman who felt trapped and worthless in a loveless marriage is gone. In her place stands someone stronger, wiser, and full of purpose. Never forget the lessons you've learned.
1.
Your worth is not determined by anyone else's opinion of you.
2.
It's okay to ask for help when you need it.
3.
True family stands by you, even when it's difficult.
4.
You are capable of more than you ever imagined. Whatever challenges lie ahead, face them with the same courage and determination that brought you here. Your past does not define you, but it has shaped you into the resilient woman you are today. The future is yours to shape. Make it a beautiful one, with love and pride."
Eve.
As I closed the journal, I felt a sense of closure wash over me. The scars of my past would always be a part of me, but they no longer held me captive. Instead, they served as a reminder of my strength and resilience. I looked out at the city skyline, alive with possibilities. For the first time in years, I felt truly free. The road ahead might be uncertain, but I was ready to face it head-on, armed with self-love, the support of true family, and the unshakable belief in my own worth. This wasn't just an ending. It was a new beginning, and I couldn't wait to see where it would lead.